Welcome to Mr. Horror. Today, we have a spine-chilling video for you as we bring you 3 true creepy vacation horror stories. Sit tight and get ready to be scared. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know about our upcoming videos. Let's get started. The Johnson family had been planning their beach vacation for months. The kids were excited to build sandcastles and swim in the ocean, while the parents were looking forward to a relaxing week away from work. As they arrived at the rental house, everything seemed perfect. The sun was shining, the ocean was sparkling, and the house was beautiful. But as they settled in for their first night, strange things began to happen. The first odd occurrence was a strange noise that woke them up in the middle of the night. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor in the room above them. But when they went to investigate, there was no one there. The next morning, they noticed that some of their belongings had been moved around as if someone had been rummaging through their things. But when they asked the property manager, she assured them that no one else had access to the house. As the days went on, the strange occurrences continued. They would hear footsteps outside their door, but when they opened it, no one was there. The TV would turn on and off by itself, and the temperature in the house would fluctuate wildly, even though the thermostat was set to a consistent temperature. The Johnsons tried to brush it off as just their imagination, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the house. They even considered cutting their vacation short and finding a new place to stay. But then, on the 4th night of their stay, things took a dark turn. They were all sound asleep when they were abruptly woken up by a loud banging on the front door. The banging was so forceful that it sounded like the door would break down any second. Mr. Johnson cautiously made his way to the door, trying to see who was outside without opening it. But when he peered through the peephole, he saw no one. He slowly opened the door, but still, there was no one there. Just as he was about to close the door, he felt a cold breeze brush past him, and he heard a voice whisper his name. The Johnson family fled from the house that night, never looking back. Little did they know, the house had a dark and haunted history, and they were not the first family to experience its terrifying presence. As the Johnson family left the haunted house, they were left with a feeling of dread and unease. They decided to book a hotel room for the rest of their vacation, just to be safe. However, even in the safety of their hotel room, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time they turned around, they thought they saw something move out of the corner of their eye, but when they looked again, there was nothing there. The kids started having nightmares about the haunted house, and Mrs. Johnson started to feel like she was being followed everywhere she went. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew that something was wrong. One day, they decided to take a walk on the beach to try and clear their heads. As they walked along the shore, they noticed a strange figure in the distance. It looked like a person, but its movements were jerky and unnatural. As they got closer, they could see that it was a woman with long, tangled hair and a pale face. She was wearing a tattered white dress that was stained with blood. The Johnson family tried to ignore the woman and keep walking, but as they passed her, she reached out and grabbed Mrs. Johnson's arm with a cold, clammy hand. Mrs. Johnson screamed and tried to pull away, but the woman wouldn't let go. Just as they were about to call for help, the woman suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving Mrs. Johnson's arm tingling with cold. They ran back to their hotel room, convinced that they had encountered a ghost. The rest of their vacation was spent in fear, with the Johnsons constantly looking over their shoulders and feeling like they were being followed. They couldn't wait to go back home, away from the horrors that lurked in the shadows of the beach. When they returned home, the Johnsons tried to forget about their terrifying vacation and move on with their lives. But the memories of the haunted house and the ghostly woman stayed with them, haunting their dreams and their thoughts. Months went by without incident, and they started to believe that maybe it was all just a figment of their imagination. That was until one night when they were awakened by the sound of their front door creaking open. They froze, listening intently as they heard footsteps slowly making their way through the house. The same cold breeze that they had felt at the haunted house brushed past them, and they knew that they were not alone. As they huddled together, paralyzed with fear, they heard a voice whisper, "I've been waiting for you." Suddenly, the room was filled with an icy wind, and they felt a presence looming over them. The Johnsons never spoke of what happened that night, but they knew that the ghostly presence from their vacation had followed them home. From that day on, strange things would happen in their house, things that couldn't be explained by logic or reason. The Johnson family had unknowingly brought a haunting home with them, and they would never be able to escape the terror that had started on their seemingly innocent beach vacation. Sarah and Lily had been planning their dream vacation to Ibiza for months. They had been best friends since high school and were excited to finally have some time to relax and party in one of the most popular destinations in the world. As they arrived at their villa, they were greeted with stunning views of the Mediterranean Sea and couldn't wait to start their adventure. They quickly settled in, unpacked their bags, and headed out to explore the island. Their first night in Ibiza was everything they had hoped for. They danced the night away at one of the best clubs on the island, drank exotic cocktails, and made new friends. The next day, they decided to rent a scooter to explore some of the less crowded areas of Ibiza. As they rode through the winding roads, Sarah suddenly spotted a small abandoned building on the side of the road. It looked like it had been abandoned for years and was covered in vines and weeds. Sarah suggested that they explore the building, but Lily was hesitant, sensing something off about it. Sarah insisted that they should at least take a quick peek, and Lily eventually agreed. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder and the atmosphere became eerily silent. The walls were covered in graffiti and old posters, and the floors were littered with debris. But then they heard a faint whisper, as if someone was trying to communicate with them. Sarah and Lily looked around, but there was no one there. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, and they were plunged into total darkness. The girls screamed in terror, and Sarah desperately tried to find a way out, but the door seemed to be stuck. As they stood there, they heard strange noises, as if someone or something was moving around in the darkness. They felt cold breath on their necks, and Lily was convinced that they were not alone. They tried calling for help, but there was no answer. Finally, after what felt like hours, the door creaked open, and the girls stumbled out into the sunlight, shaken and terrified. They quickly hopped on their scooter and raced back to the safety of their villa, vowing never to explore abandoned buildings again. But little did they know, the horrors they had experienced were just the beginning of a much larger nightmare. As the days went on, Sarah and Lily couldn't shake off the feeling of being followed. They thought they saw strange figures lurking in the shadows, but when they looked again, there was no one there. One night, they decided to attend a party at a nearby club. It was packed with people, and the music was loud and pulsating. As they danced, they felt something brush past them, and when they turned around, they saw a man staring at them with a sinister grin on his face. They tried to ignore him and dance further away, but the man seemed to follow them everywhere they went. They tried to lose him by going outside, but he was still there, watching them from a distance. Feeling uneasy, they decided to leave the club and head back to their villa. But as they walked down the dark streets, they realized that they were being followed by the man from the club. He seemed to be getting closer and closer, and they could hear his heavy breathing behind them. Suddenly, the man lunged at them, and Sarah and Lily ran as fast as they could. They didn't stop until they reached their villa and locked the door behind them. Shaken and terrified, they called the police, but when they arrived, the man was nowhere to be found. The police told them that they had received similar reports from other tourists on the island, and that they were investigating the matter. For the rest of their vacation, Sarah and Lily couldn't relax. They felt like they were constantly being watched and followed, and they were afraid to leave the safety of their villa. When it was finally time to leave Ibiza, they were relieved to be going home, but they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had experienced on their dream vacation. As they boarded the plane, Sarah and Lily were grateful to be leaving Ibiza behind. They both felt a sense of relief as the plane lifted off the ground, taking them further away from the nightmare they had just experienced. But their relief was short-lived. As the plane flew over the Mediterranean Sea, they heard a loud explosion, followed by the sound of shattering glass. The plane started to shake violently, and passengers screamed in terror. Sarah and Lily held on to each other, praying for a miracle. But it was too late. The plane crashed into the sea, killing everyone on board. The investigation into the cause of the crash was inconclusive, but some speculated that it might have been caused by a bomb planted by the same man who had been following Sarah and Lily. Others believed it was just a tragic accident. Whatever the cause, the horror of what had happened in Ibiza followed Sarah and Lily to the end of their lives. They never forgot the feeling of being stalked and hunted, and the memory of their dream vacation turned nightmare haunted them for years to come. Jack and Emily had been planning their romantic vacation to Aruba for months. It was their first trip together as a couple, and they were excited to spend some quality time together on the beautiful island. As they arrived at their resort, they were greeted with stunning views of the turquoise waters and white sandy beaches. They quickly settled in, unpacked their bags, and headed out to explore the island. Their first few days in Aruba were filled with sun, sand, and relaxation. They lounged on the beach, sipped exotic drinks, and went on long walks along the shore. As the sun began to set, they decided to take a stroll through the town and check out the local bars and restaurants. As they walked down a quiet alley, they suddenly heard footsteps behind them. They turned around to see a man walking towards them, but he quickly disappeared around the corner. They shrugged it off and continued their walk. But as they turned the corner, they saw the man again, this time standing in front of them. He looked disheveled and agitated, and Jack and Emily could tell that something was off. "Excuse me, do you need any help?" Emily asked, trying to be friendly. The man looked at her with a blank stare and said nothing. Suddenly, he lunged at them, and Jack and Emily ran as fast as they could. They could hear the man's footsteps behind them, but they didn't stop until they reached the safety of their resort. Shaken and scared, they reported the incident to the resort staff and the local police. But little did they know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare they would never forget. The next day, Jack and Emily received a call from the police informing them that they had found the man who had attacked them. He was a known criminal with a history of violent behavior, and they were relieved to know that he was behind bars. Thinking that their ordeal was over, they tried to enjoy the rest of their vacation. However, strange things started happening. They began receiving anonymous phone calls to their hotel room, with heavy breathing on the other end of the line. And whenever they went out, they felt like they were being watched. One day, they returned to their room to find that it had been ransacked. Their belongings were scattered everywhere, and they could tell that someone had been searching for something. Feeling like they were in danger, they contacted the police again. This time, they were told that there had been a string of burglaries targeting tourists in the area. The police increased their patrols, but Jack and Emily couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. As their vacation came to an end, they couldn't wait to go back home. They packed their bags and headed to the airport, relieved that they had made it out of Aruba alive. But little did they know, their nightmare was far from over. Upon arriving home, Jack and Emily found that their apartment had been broken into and ransacked, with several valuable items missing. They immediately contacted the police, who informed them that the burglar had left behind a note with their names and addresses. The couple was terrified and didn't know what to do. They feared for their safety and wondered how the burglar could have found them all the way back home. They decided to stay with family for a while, hoping that the situation would calm down. But things only got worse. They received threatening messages and phone calls, and even their family members were targeted. It was as if the burglar was always one step ahead of them. Eventually, the police were able to track down the burglar and arrested him. It turned out that he had been hired by someone to steal from the couple, but he had taken things too far. Jack and Emily were relieved that the nightmare was finally over, but they couldn't shake off the feeling of paranoia and fear. Their romantic vacation had turned into a nightmare that haunted them for a long time. They realized that they could never be too careful, even in the most beautiful and romantic destinations. Thank you for watching our video on 3 true creepy vacation horror stories. We hope you enjoyed hearing about these spine-tingling experiences and that they will make you think twice before booking your next vacation. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel for more terrifying tales and hit that bell icon to get notified when we upload new content. Don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know which story creeped you out the most. And for those of you who are still planning your next vacation, remember to stay safe and be aware of your surroundings. You never know what could be lurking around the corner. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.